Aloha, everyone. I'd like to introduce you all to a very special guest today, one that I also call a friend and a mentor. Sparrow Hart of Circles of Air and Stone, who spent over, I guess, the last 40 years in helping people discover their purpose and their passion in life. So welcome, Sparrow, and thank you for sharing some time with us today.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Gary. Good to be here with you.
Good to see you.
Yeah.
So to start, maybe you can sort of tell us a little bit about yourself and how did your own personal journey begin and where did you go from there?
Gosh, well, I mean, ultimately when people say, how did your personal journey begin? The obvious funny answer is, well, I was born and and then of course, but I would say in terms of what I'm doing now, I lead Vision Quest, and I've done that for over 3 decades. And I did my first Vision Quest 41 years ago. So I think the way that began was, to put it in simple terms, when I was a child, I lived in a house that didn't feel very safe to be in. Like lots of people in childhood, for various reasons, they don't feel seen or they don't feel safe. But we had a lot of woods around us. So going to the woods, going into nature, following streams, and that was the safe place to be. So certainly growing up, I always had that kind of sense of, oh, when one went to nature, that was a safe place to be. And certainly and then jump ahead, a decade and a half, I'm in college, and I'm in college in the late 60s when it was all the protest, Vietnam War, and war and revolution and everything. And I was in a really good school, but I realized that honestly, I had very little interest in what that school was trying to teach me. I mean, basically, right, in some sense, they were preparing me to take some role in the large corporate enterprise. And I was living during a time where all of that seemed in some sense,
right,
not inauthentic. And so after graduate school, I dropped out of graduate school and left to go where I was comfortable. I left graduate school in April of 1971, and I went out west and I created a little rite of passage for myself. I spent the next 5 months essentially on a solo hike through the mountains and up the Pacific Crest Trail and through Oregon and Washington and into British Columbia. And I think I really started to find something that was at the core of who I was, this longing for a deeper connection, this longing to in some way engage the world in a way that felt passionate and really authentic. And then I came back from that, and probably for the next decade, I was living in Vermont and in various communes and this and that. But in the late 1970s, I read a book called Black Elk Speaks, and it's a fairly well-known book. I mean, Joseph Campbell called it one of the great spiritual texts of human history. And so I read this book, Black Elk Speaks, and I mean, a lot of that book was about the life of Black Elk, this Plains Indian holy man who was born in around 1860. But a lot of the book was also about his vision, his personal vision quest, his going out into nature and fasting and being alone, and praying and meditating. And when I read that book, just something hit me and said, I have to do this. This was something I had to do. And so the next summer, being 1980, I hitchhiked my way out to of the Black Hills of South Dakota, and went into the Black Hills, and really totally on my own, went up to the top of what was then called Harney Peak. It's since been renamed and is now goes by the name Black Elk Peak, because in that book, that was where Black Elk was taken when he had his great vision. And so anyway, I'd hitchhiked out there and went up to the top of Black Elk Peak, and I fasted for 3 days and nights, and I had a very altered state vision, which included the knowledge that I would be leading vision quests for as the big for a big part of my life. That would be a core practice, and that's in some sense how it all started. That's the short version, I would say.
What's your I know that there is an explanation of the Native American belief of the rite of passage and this idea of, I guess, metaphorically dying as a young brave and then coming back as to come back to the tribe and take your place. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Well, yeah, I would say even in a larger context than Native Americans, I mean, all across the world, at least historically, I don't know how much it's true at all in today's modern culture, but certainly all across the world, virtually all people have had rites of passage. And certainly the most famous one is puberty rituals, where the boy becomes a man or the girl becomes a woman. And in some sense, all of those cultures see that in this ritual that the boy dies to childhood and then is kind of reborn as a man. And in fact, it is the ritual itself that causes that change. That's why it's a ritual, because it makes that change happen. And so certainly in those rituals, the puberty rituals, that there is a death, there's a leaving behind an old identity and an old way of seeing the world and an old way of engaging with the world. And so there's the death of that, and then the boy or the girl is kind of brought into a new identity, which usually involves elders, teachers, adults, and then is taught the rituals, the practices, the way of engaging this new identity, and he or she comes back with it. So it's in some sense it's a metaphorical death and rebirth ritual, as right. Virtually all rites of passage are. So
what kind of I'm sure you had a profound experience on this quest.
Mm-hmm.
Can you share some of that, or is it too personal on that journey that you took up there?
Oh, you mean on the very first one?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think of that with a lot of humor now, just because on that very first one, I so did not know what I was doing that the death rebirth was almost literal. I went up there, and I thought the whole idea was, it was the idea of vision quest is you go off in nature and you fast and you pray. But I thought I was so unprepared that I had no equipment at all. I was wearing cotton clothes. I got rained on. I got soaked. I spend nights with my teeth. Your teeth actually do chatter when you get that cold. And so, I was really skirting the edge of exposure and exhaustion on that first one. And, although the exhaustion and exposure probably contributed to it, I did have a big altered state experience where it's hard to know exactly. It's hard to describe in some state that is beyond the ordinary, to describe it in ordinary terms. So, but I would say certainly my physical boundaries all of a sudden just loosened, and I became identified with the whole mountaintop. I felt it as a part of my body. the usual, yeah, the boundaries between me and the outer physical were just dissolved, and I was just part of the consciousness of the mountain. And yeah, I would almost feel like this scratching, itching on my back, and I would turn around and see a squirrel running across the rock, but I was feeling it kind of in my back. And that certainly certainly gave me a lot of insight and possibilities about what the potential of this kind of work and this kind of exploration could do and could bring. So
I don't think I ever shared with you this story, but when we went on that vision quest together, I guess that was in the mid 90s or late 90s. We had moved from that site where we were doing that, and we moved to another campsite that was close to a motel, and there was a restaurant there. So we went to that campsite, as you recall, and then took a shower by the pool, and it was pretty rustic. But I remember sitting there in that restaurant with you and 7 other people that I had just met. I didn't know them before going on that, and that wasn't very long. It was what, 6 days or something, whatever. It was a very short time, and something just came over me at that point in time. It was like I felt this profound sense of gratitude of just being alive and being there, that it felt almost like a shift that happened for me. And I came away thinking, if I died tomorrow, I would feel fulfilled.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of curious on your standpoint too, this act of the vision quest and other things, how does that help in focusing and looking at our mortality, in helping the audience now figure out their passion? How do they develop that? You obviously see that connection. This is what you teach, right?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, to me, there's a lot of ways I could describe that, or a lot of ways I could enter the conversation, but I'll start. The first noble truth of Buddhism is that all life is suffering. That's kind of the first noble truth of Buddhism. But yeah, we enter life and there's suffering. People we care about die, whatever. We have pets, they die. There's all of these losses. And in some sense, to me, the way the Vision Quest and various other rituals work is, yeah, all of that is a tragedy, unless your life is meaningful enough to make it worth it.
Right.
So, it's just like, so to me, the whole point is, if I'm doing something that feels like it brings me closer to the mystery or closer to what most people call God, if I'm doing something that feels so valuable and so like an expression of what I came here to do, then if I die doing that, it's like, oh my God, how else would I want to die? To me, I think there was a author or someone named Norman Cousins.
Right.
Yeah, and one of his famous quotes is, "The great tragedy of life is not that we die. The great tragedy is what dies in us while we're still alive."
Right.
So the tragedy is not death. The tragedy is if you're not living your full life. That's the tragedy. If you are living your full life, then, oh my God, it's all worth it. And, I'm happy. I feel like I'm on my path. I'm doing what I've come here to do. I'm giving my love and my gifts to my friends. And if I die doing that, then yeah, it's so much different than to die and feel like, oh my God, I never did that. If you're living a life where you feel like you haven't developed your full potential, then death is a tragedy. But the tragedy is not because you die. It's because of the way you live.
Right. Well, how would you advise people to discover these kind of thoughts in themselves, because I know we probably spend a lot of time gathering information first, and then we go off until we figure that whatever that thing that we want to go ahead and do, or that spark. How do you get that spark? Well, what would you advise them to do?
Well, I mean, well, certainly in the way that I've done it, and as you know, you've been on a vision quest, um, and and I don't know who's going to be watching or listening to this podcast, and but certainly for me, certainly as someone who leads Vision Quest and has done over 30 of my own, um, there's a whole bunch of parts of that process that allow us to find that spark. And so, if the listeners don't know, I'll say the first part of a Vision Quest is, well, there are three elements. One is that you are alone, you're in solitude. The second element, so aloneness and solitude. The second element is it happens in nature. Usually wilderness could be the mountains, the desert, near the ocean, the forest.
Not with Netflix around, huh?
No, definitely. You will never find yourself on Netflix. You may find good movies, you may find roles that you identify with. And then the other part of a Vision Quest is fasting. So essentially, that I think maybe that, I don't know which part is most important, but that first part of solitude, it's like we're not going to find our deep inner longings and desires and core if our attention is always distracted by
right
whatever's on the little screen so many people spend so much time on, or if we're always trying to respond to somebody else and their needs. It's like we have to in some sense distance from all of that to have a time and space that's only ours.
Right.
And it's only, in some sense, we have to find that time and space. I mean, Joseph Campbell, one of the things he said was that every person needs some kind of space or time where this time is totally your own. Nobody else can kind of interfere in it. So we really need to, in whatever way we do it, make a commitment to essentially have a relationship with, some people might call it with God or with the mystery or with a higher power, or some people might just say to have a deep relationship with the core of who we are. I heard you use, I forget which phrase the word authentic, but that word authentic and authority and author all come from the same root. It's just like author. If you're the author of your life, it means you are writing the story.
Right.
And
right.
if you're living a life that you wrote, then it's an authentic life. But if you're just living a life that you've gotten from the cultural downloads, or because your parents want you to be this or that person, or you're trying to live a life that'll please a partner or something, or a life that's going to fit somebody else's definition of success, it's not an authentic life. And of course, there's always going to be some inner part that feels like it's not getting listened to, it's not getting expressed. I'm not doing what I came here to do. I'm doing what somebody else wants me to do, or something. And so I think we have to give ourselves the time to find out, if this is really my life. I mean, we could start small and say, if this, whatever, at any point in the day, if the next hour were totally mine, what would I do with it? And then you could wake up in the morning and say, if this day were just mine to do anything I want, then, and then even get greater is like, if this month were mine to have it the way I want, and then or if this winter were mine, and then we can go into if this year were mine, or if this life were mine. But it's like, I think we have to start small and saying, and really commit to saying, if this is my life, what do I need to do to feel satisfied, fulfilled, whatever?
I think there's also that challenge too, as being either a son or daughter, that you're trying to please your parents, because for a number of years as a son, I figured I'd follow in my father's footsteps or make him proud of me. And then, I did that, and then I moved away, and I thought I had disappointed him quite a bit. Then it was years later that he said, no, I didn't think anything about it. And I was like, what? I thought I've been doing this all this time. So
Yeah.
I came to that point, it's, yeah, you gotta do this for yourself, and you gotta take that time.
Yeah, that's really interesting about your father. It's like you're not even trying to live up to his standards. You're trying to live up to the standards you think he has,
That's
and it
right.
turns out you're wrong.
Right. Well, that's what we do with everybody, right? Because we kind of assume what these people are thinking, and that we're trying to live up to their expectations of us.
Yeah.
That ego, right?
Yeah. Or where essentially we're bowing down to you could say we're bowing down to the wrong idol or to the wrong God or something. Yeah. So it's great that you kind of had that realization and you could share it with him, while he was still alive.
Yeah. I was blessed that he lived so long. He passed just 2 months short of 101. So
yeah.
Yeah.
And what you say about your father trying to live up to what you thought were his expectations of you. Well, another one of my favorite quotes, and this is another Joseph Campbell quote. He said, so many people in life, spend all their energy trying to climb to get to the top of the ladder. And when and if they get there, they realize they put it against the wrong wall. They finally get to the top and realize this isn't even the ladder I wanted to climb.
Right.
But they don't realize that till maybe they get to the top, and then whatever it's like we spend some people spend decades trying to accomplish some goal, and then when they actually get it, they realize, and that didn't do for me what I thought we would do.
Right, their thinking was so way off.
It's like, okay, now I'm just richer and unhappy. Or whatever it is. Now I've done this, and that hasn't touched the core longing.
You've spoken a lot about some of these books. You quoted a lot of these books. Do you have any books that you could recommend that some of our listeners would first pick up? I know that you've written a couple books yourself, right?
Yeah.
What are those books? I think there's a set of poems and which goes into a lot of your thinking, and also a vision quest book or something.
Yeah, I think probably in terms of the people listening, I would say the first book I wrote, which is called Letters to the River, A Guide to a Dream Worth Living, probably speaks to a lot of that deep longing and how do we get there. My second book was really called The Vision Quest, a Guide's Training Manual, and it's certainly got a lot of information on the Vision Quest and a lot of the background, but for someone who's really just exploring, that second book is for someone who's already done a lot of exploring and really wants the details and the practicals and the how-tos. But I think that first book really talks about, a guide to a dream worth living. It's really about how to create a life that, a dream worth living. So many people, not just when they're children, they talk about, they're asked, what are your dreams? And, and most people, when they ask, what are your dreams? They're not asking, what happened last night when your eyes were closed, when you were in bed.
Right.
they're talking about what are your deep longings that you feel would be the answer to some big question inside yourself.
Right.
And that I think, yeah, that's the real question. What are your dreams, and what do you need in your life to where you feel as, oh my God, I'm living it, I'm realizing it. So I
I
think,
I found that book, that first book, nice because you have half of it with the poems that you wrote, but also the other half that really explains everything that is a practical book too. So you
yeah,
got both sides of that. That's an awesome.
yeah. It took me a long time to figure out how to organize it, but eventually, I mean, it's kind of like you say the first half is kind of really for your left brain. It's
Yeah.
about why do we need to do this, and what are the needs it serves, and the kind of why of all of this makes sense. And then the second half is really for the right brain. It's more for like
Right.
poems or things written when you're actually in some different state and what that looks like. So it's almost like the first half is a tell me and the second half is a show me kind of. So, but yeah.
What about some books that you read? Do you have some special books that you find that were very profound in your transformation?
Yeah, sure, but I want to say to me, I mean, I think of transformation as kind of like a lifelong journey. And since I've been doing this for like 40 years, at least, there's been a lot of books that were really important at some point in my life. Um, so yeah, I mean, lately I've been really trying to look. Lately I've been influenced a lot by, as you know, the whole lot of political polarization and craziness that's been going on,
Yeah.
and I've been really trying to find you know what are the core things that we need to accept, that we really need to accept about us as human beings, and to really accept, as opposed to saying, oh, you have these things, therefore you're a rotten person and should be excommunicated. And so I read two books. I don't know if you've heard of the writer Yuval Noah Harari.
No.
Yeah, he's actually Israeli, but he wrote a book. I would say it came out 5 years ago. It was called *Sapiens: A Brief History of Humankind*, and he essentially looks at all of human history, and the invention of agriculture, the invention of fire, and he talks about the role of our imagination in creating the world we live in. He essentially says that what humans did that moved them from just this kind of ordinary mammal somewhere in the middle of the food chain, that kind of moved them into becoming the dominant mammal life form, the top of the food chain, was our imagination. Um, and it's really, in some sense, deep, because he essentially is saying, well, that we humans live in three different worlds. The first world is kind of the primal objective world. That's the world of rocks and trees and gravity, and and the thing about the objective world is it really doesn't change depending on how you think about it.
Yeah.
In other words, you can decide to believe or not believe in gravity, but it doesn't matter what your belief system is when you step off the top of the roof.
Right. Right.
If you don't believe in gravity, you'll fall at the same rate as someone who does. So he talks about that. That's a world that that doesn't change depending on what, and we all have to engage with and interact with that world. It's like our biology is part of it.
Yeah.
And he says the second world we all live in is what's called the subjective world. That's our kind of inner life and inner processes. So like you or I could wake up tomorrow morning having just had a terrifying dream. You know, we're getting chased by the mob or something,
Yeah.
and we're running and we wake up and we're kind of panicked and upset. But nobody else in the world is. It's like, you know, a lot of our inner thoughts and feelings and emotions, they're just totally ours.
Right.
And then the third world, and this is what he talks about in that book, is he calls the intersubjective reality. It's the things that are totally imaginary, but because everybody agrees on them, they become part of our world. So I just give you an example just so this becomes a little clearer to people listening. So there are some natural cycles that exist in primal reality. There's the cycle of a day, you know, the day, the sun rises and tomorrow it rises, and that makes a day. And there's the natural cycle of a year. You know, it's spring, summer, fall, winter, but so those things exist in reality. But a week, there is no natural 7-day cycle happening.
Right.
But we all agree on it. And because we agree on it, like 7 billion people function as if it exists, and it doesn't exist. And that's really where a lot of our trouble comes, because we have an inner life and an outer life, and we're trying to adjust it to some intersubjective. So, you know, so yeah, those things like a week that has no basics in the primal world, nor does the idea of a country with borders, nor does the idea of money, nor does the idea of a corporation. But we all agree on those things. And because we agree on them, you know, 7 billion people can cooperate and not just always. But because we agree on them, there are all these things that we just feel hemmed in by and can't do and can't see as possibilities because that don't actually exist. And so anyway, I've gone off on a little tangent here, but
Well, this has been really great, Sparrow. I know that your company, Circles of Air and Stone, can you sort of describe what your company is all about? And I know that you have some things. I was wanting to take some workshops from you too.
okay. Yeah. You know, I came up with that name, Circles of Air and Stone, when after I'd done my first Vision Quest in 1980, I did 6 or 7 more in the following years, and then I apprenticed to this couple, Stephen Foster and Meredith Little, who wrote the book of the Vision Quest, and did a Vision Quest with them as part of a group. And during that Vision Quest, this poem came to me, and then the very short poem is: circles of air, circles of stone, the earth circles, and night follows day. We bury our seeds, we bury our bones, while sacred birds circle and pray. So to me, my business or the company is what circles of stone refer to is those kind of ancient megalithic sites like Stonehenge and medicine wheels. There are these ancient sites that were very profound and meaningful to earth cultures, you know, throughout human history. That's the circles of stone. Circles of air is the movement that hawks and eagles make as they spiral upward. So circles of air and stone is about connecting earth and sky, connecting with the great spiritual traditions of human history, but somehow bringing them into daily life that's grounded here in the lives we have to lead. in our culture, in our families, in the neighborhoods we're in. So it's about bringing the great teachings into modern life, and also ways to take the facts and the experiences of modern life and see them in a much bigger picture. And so yeah, I lead these various processes and workshops. I mean, the obvious one, and one you've done, is the Vision Quest, and I lead about 7 or 8 of those a year.
Different parts of the United States, right?
Yeah, pretty much one a month, starting in March and through October. So March is in Death Valley, which that's the one that you went on years ago, and then April, Southern Utah, then Southwest New Mexico. And so anyway, so I lead these Vision Quests, 11-day long programs that have a 4-day a night solo in them. Yeah, I also lead retreats and workshops, which could be anywhere from a long weekend to 5 or 6 days. I lead them on shamanic journeying for people who are really interested. Shamanic journeying is these bunch of techniques to bring up all sorts of information and have experiences that are outside of our rational way of thinking, and then take those experiences and somehow try and integrate them into our daily life. So yeah, I lead workshops on shamanic journeying, I lead workshops on dreaming, and then how to work with dreams and how to evoke and create more dreams, and to see dreaming as a part of the way that our soul speaks to us. And yeah, I lead a couple of men's workshops, one a week long and one that goes for 9 weekends, once a month. Yeah, and I lead some workshops in the Yucatan. I lead a workshop called Mayan Adventures, which is essentially going to some of those great ruins and archaeological sites and learning about what the people believed and how they organized their life, and using some of that and creating some experiences based on that, which again bring up ways we can look at ourselves that we don't normally do. So yeah. So
Interesting. Very, very interesting. Well, I want to really thank you again for being here. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but it's been wonderful. It's been wonderful reconnecting with you, and also to help enlighten some of our listeners here too.
Yeah, well, thanks for inviting me on, and I hope I haven't gone off on too many tangents that might not be relevant to your people. But
I think that whatever people are going to need to hear, they're going to. Everything else they're not going to hear, but it's just the stuff that they're going to need to listen to at this point in time, right?
Yeah, I would say, given, I guess you're working with or dealing with people who are facing those real questions of death and dying. Is that true?
Partly, about trying to figure out where they want to go in their life. And, from my standpoint of view, it's the idea that we focused so much on the grief and the possibility of this ending, but they don't realize how important it is to take that and to convert it into a passion. Realize, like what you said, you don't want to die with that, how Wayne Dyer says, die with that music still inside you, or Campbell, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's I think it just brings up a couple things that I certainly would want to share with the people listening. One is, again, here's another quote, but it's by this guy, Robert Thurman, and it's about really following, what's inside you. He said, ask not what the world needs. Ask instead what brings you alive. Because what the world really needs is people who are fully alive. That's what, and so, yeah, I think that's most important. And I'll just say the way that I see it, whatever we call that force that's greater than us. I mean, a lot of people call it God, a lot of people call it higher power, a lot of people call it capital S self, or I call it great mystery. But the way that I look at it is really that I came into, like, we're all born, and I came into the world, and my sense of connection to that great mystery is there are certain seeds that were planted in me when I came in, and that my job through this life is to first learn that they're there,
Right.
and then learn how to germinate them and nurture and cultivate and weed and fertilize them so that those seeds can actually grow and flower and bear fruit. And that's what I'm here to do. And so I really like that image of, yeah, the tragedy or the fear of death is, comes from, oh my God, I might die, and I haven't cultivated those seeds. I haven't given them to the world. And I think if we do what we need to do to fully cultivate them so they do bear fruit and give it to the world, then when death comes, you can say, okay, I'm good with that, because I have no regrets. I did what I'm here to do. And you can be at peace with that if you've really, yeah, if you haven't got music inside that's never been played. So,
I facilitated a non-grief, death and dying discussion group a while back. And one of the first questions asked was, what are you afraid of? And interestingly enough, aside from people of, fearing of the unknown, or, what's going to happen, pain or something, I think the biggest thing that people were afraid of is regret.
yeah.
Not doing whatever they needed to do, or that inner feeling of what they needed to do. So
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I mean, you asked me, probably 15 minutes ago about books I'd recommend. One of the books that's become incredibly popular, like in the last few years, is a book by Michael Pollan, How to Change Your Mind.
yeah.
And it's a book about psychedelics. And he's a great writer, and he went into exploring psychedelics as a total skeptic. But one of the things he talked about, there was some research done at Johns Hopkins University around people who have terminal diagnoses. They have 2 months, 6 months, a year, whatever to live, and all of the fear and anxiety that comes up around those terminal diagnoses. And so in Johns Hopkins, they were having these people take psychedelics. And one of certainly part of the powerful research is on a fairly high dose of psychedelics. A lot of these people had experiences of being in this place where they clearly existed and had consciousness, but they were without a body.
Yeah.
Yeah. And some of the things that are certainly striking about that research is that, I mean, this just doesn't happen through normal therapy, but it's just like 85% of the people who had these terminal diagnoses, and it had one strong, powerful second with psilocybin mushrooms, completely lost all fear of death, 85%. And it didn't, within a year, however long, it didn't come back. And so it's certainly, yeah, for people questioning that, it's really, all of this fear and anxiety doesn't have to be there. All of that fear and anxiety is all about where we put our mind. It's not about the external facts. It's about what we're doing with our mind and the way we're seeing the world and the way we're seeing ourselves in the world. And,
Nice.
Yeah.
Some very, very profound messages that you've shared with us today. So, well, thank you. Thank you again. Our time is up, so
okay.
Appreciate everything. I know what your website is, so I'm going to put that down in our notes, and so if they want to get in touch with you, they can do it that way.
Okay, great. All right, thanks so much. It's been great talking with you, and to whoever's listening out there, it's been great kind of sharing some of the things I'm so passionate about.
Yeah. Okay, Sparrow. Well, thank you very much.
All right, Gary.
Okay.
Be well.
Yeah,
Till next time.
okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.